realfaith.org.au.
When I was in grade 2, we were reading about inspirational people, and the only person I can remember from that is Mother Teresa. It was how she, helped the people in Calcutta, and I wanted to become a nun. I wanted to join the sisterhood.
Yeah? Oh, really? Okay.
Didn't realize what it took to be a nun, but I wanted to join her and help people out.
Welcome to Real Faith. Conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life, and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
In July 2011, Gloria Anderson was abducted from her home by a boarder who she let stay at a granny flat on the back of her property. This began a 3-day horrific ordeal that included being taken to another state while being held captive. She was mocked for her faith and endured extreme physical torment. After praying constantly, she eventually found an opportunity to escape, and she is now seeking to help others who have gone through similar traumatic experiences. Gloria Anderson will share selected parts of her story with us. And parents, today's program is not recommended for children, as we will be dealing with some pretty serious topics. Gloria Anderson, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you with us. And also joining us in the studio is Gloria's friend, Priscilla Chandra. Priscilla,
thank you for having me, Eric.
Glad to have you with us. And you guys go way back, is that right? You've known each other several years?
I'd say around 20 plus, yeah. Yes.
About a while.
Okay, and so Priscilla, you've kind of been journeying with Gloria through all of this, is that right?
That's right. So this was a very horrific story that I heard in church. Gloria and I go to the same church, or went to the same church. And so our pastor announced one day that a member of our church had been through an abduction and a horrific situation, and so the whole church was horrified at hearing
to find out
this.
A member of the congregation had been abducted.
Yeah, and everybody was thinking like, who's that? But he didn't say any names at the time. So after the service, when we get out, I see Gloria, and she said, "That story is mine," and that nearly floored me, basically.
Yeah.
That something like that could happen to somebody I know that well. So from then on, we started to meet regularly and journey together, and we've continued to do it over all these years. So
okay,
yeah, I am with her.
Yes, and I should say that years before that, my wife Gina and I went to the same church, and so we've known Gloria and her ex-husband. We've had picnics together and different social activities together because we were all kind of part of the missionary community at that church.
Yeah.
So we've known you for several years. When we started to go to a church closer to our home, we kind of lost contact, but still were Facebook friends and knew each other.
Yes.
And yes, we were also shocked to find out, oh, wait a second, this is somebody we know. This is Gloria's story. Gloria, you've gone through this experience, and now you're sharing your story, and you've been sharing it for a number of years. Is that right?
Yes. For a while, I could not go public with my story due to legal reasons because it was still in trial. Even though the abduction took place in 2011, the final court hearing was in December 2018.
Wow. So a long, long time.
Yeah, 7.5 years. So
wow. And which is one of the things that you're working to help change in the system, is that right?
Yes. So I've been requesting the government to, or even states, to cooperate and work together where a person who's abducted doesn't have to go through this lengthy process, because I had to go through a trial in Sydney and then one here in Melbourne.
And that was because?
Just because he crossed borders.
Yeah.
Because they crossed borders. And that also happens not just with me, it also happens with people in domestic violence and different issues. So there needs to be more cooperation with the state governments basically working together, because it just re-traumatizes the victim over and over again when it's not necessary, I think, because it's one continuous crime. Even though the courts agree it's a one continuous crime, they still had to be tried in two courts.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that you're working to try to make better for victims.
Yes.
But there are other things in your ministry that you've now started, but we'll talk about that later on. We'll end our conversation talking about some of the great things that you're involved in to help others who've gone through similar circumstances. I want to begin your story back in India where you were born, but before we do that, I want to read a quote from, you're writing a book about your experiences, and this is a quote from your book, which I really think kind of captures your heart in all of this. You wrote, "My story is about the tenacity and strength of the human soul, the recovery and figuring out how to move forward even when I couldn't or didn't want to, how someone doesn't have the energy to drag themselves out of bed because of the trauma, how one learns to love and trust again with God's help. I want to bring change to the world and to give others the strength and confidence to be able to share or even relate to some of the struggles I have had on my journey of finding my way out of a very dark place."
Yeah.
So that's your heart to help others.
Yes. I've always wanted to help people. So
that goes back to your childhood.
Yes, it does. So like you said, I was born in India, so born in a good Christian family. And even though my parents' church, or family church, should I say, was a bit more sort of leaning towards a cult, maybe.
Cult-like, we could say?
Yes, cult-like.
In other words, they had some doctrine right, but others, it was off doctrinally.
Yes. It was like they believed that they were the only select people that would go to heaven, and the rest of
that sounds cult-like. Yes, that's not Orthodox Christianity.
Yes, but
this is in India.
This is in India, but they're apparently they're international. They're all over in other parts of the world as well. So even though I grew up there, I think so. There was something part of my parents. I guess say their own faith. They knew there were other. They would still let us listen to other churches' sermons or different pastors and different things.
Okay, so you had spiritual input that was healthy.
Yes.
And doctrinally correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so that helped as I grew to sort of differentiate what was biblically right and also what was not probably from God or godly.
So years later, as a mature Christian, you could look back and say, oh, yeah, they were definitely off in these areas.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there were some very dark things that they were wrong about.
Yes.
In your childhood.
Yes. I was abused in the church as well, so that was quite hard. And then at the same time, grew up fairly confused because there's one side where they were teaching about sexual sin. As
the Bible teaches.
Yes. And then there was the other side where I was being abused in the same church. So I was having conflicted thoughts. It's like, here I am getting abused by your people. At the same time, you're saying this is wrong. Where am I right or where am I wrong?
Yeah, right. So basically, they weren't practicing what they were preaching.
Definitely not.
Okay, so here you are only about, 6-7 years old.
Yes.
And you accepted Jesus as your Savior.
Yes. I remember that really clearly, actually. That was a very beautiful moment. I remember sitting with my mom having a morning devotion, sitting in the lounge room. I remember it was winter because I remember the fire going on. So it was like you could hear the wood crackling. So it was really something that's imprinted in my mind. And around that same time, I was filled with the Spirit, with the Holy Spirit. So I think that was my foundation. That was my faith that held me to what was coming ahead. And I think so that also helped me to manage the abuse and stay strong and to understand and to separate the two. That's
interesting. At a young age, you were able to separate the hypocritical church from your relationship with God.
Yes. I don't know how it happened. I still can't give that answer. My psychologist is confused as I am. Even she actually 2 sessions ago, she actually mentioned that. She goes, I really don't know how you did it or what was the switch that you had in your as a childhood that I was able to separate the fact what the abuse was being done was man's fault and that was not God's fault. So to understand that and to have that at a very early age, I think because I was able to understand that, I was able to manage and sustain myself through the years, even though there was, you could say, spiritual abuse. When I mentioned about my abuse to my mother, I went to her.
You confided in her?
Yeah, I did. When I was about 12 or 13. And her response at that time was, she obviously freaked out. She was like, my daughter is telling me that. You could see that in her face, just that reaction. And her, because of the belief in that church was so warped, the theology was so warped, her way of dealing at that time was to make me write a confession letter for participating in the abusive act.
So you were, in a sense, punished.
Yes.
For being...
I was a sinner.
A victim.
Yes.
It's hard to understand, but in her mind at that time, that's what she was thinking.
Yes. Though
she since changed her mind, thankfully.
Yes, she did. She did. As years went on, actually not long before I got married, she actually confronted some people, and they did write an apology letter to me. So she did try to mend her ways, and I always say that's all she knew at that time, and she did her best with what she had, or whatever, theology or whatever understanding she knew of that era.
But at the end of the day, you're confused.
Yes.
And that didn't help anything.
No.
You were looking to an adult, your mother,
for comfort,
to rectify an injustice.
Yeah.
And she made it even worse at that time.
Yes. It definitely didn't help. For the longest time, it reinforced what, all the sort of trauma and the guilt and the shame and the self-loathing that comes with abuse, all the classic stuff a person goes through, it just reinforced that constantly. And that self-beating, your inner self, the conversation you have. And I still have remnants of that. I still do. I still have those conversations occasionally, and then I just have to snap out of it. But they're still there. And
you mentioned you're going to a counselor.
Yes, I'm seeing a psychologist, good Christian psychologist, which really helps. So, yeah, she's helped me work through a lot of the intense...
And she's happy for you to share your story?
Yes, she definitely is. And she knows I am sharing my story for, not just for myself.
But the other theme, the positive out of all this darkness, is God was your refuge.
Definitely.
In the darkest times in your early childhood.
Definitely. My best moments with God, my father was an orthopedic surgeon, so we ran a hospital in our property, and on the side we also had a kindergarten. And we had that for a while. Part of the school, there's, kids playing games and, all monkey bars and all sorts of stuff, and there were swings. And the swing was my place to go. That was my refuge as a kid.
Oh, wow. Somehow that made you feel safe or peaceful?
I don't know. That's where I used to have most of my conversations with God.
Is that right? On the swings?
On the swings. And I don't know what it was, just that motion of swinging.
Yeah.
And so much so, not long, last year or the year before, I had a really bad episode of PTSD.
Post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes. And on a whim, I went to the tattooist and actually got the girl swinging on the...
What, tattoo?
Yeah, I went and got a tattoo.
I thought you were going to say you went to a playground, but instead you got a tattoo of a swing.
Tattoo.
You could have just went to the playground.
No, I went to the tattoo artist, but I got that tattooed of a girl on a swing because
that was your happy place.
That was my happy place, and that was just a reminder of, and it still is my reminder. Whenever I still have struggle, I just think of that girl on the swing and
talking to God.
Yes.
Our guest today is Gloria Anderson, along with her friend Priscilla Chandra, in our Melbourne studios. Gloria is sharing her life journey and the events which led to her abduction in 2011. Next, we'll hear more about growing up in India and other aspects of Gloria's childhood. All that and more is coming up when we return right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scadabo, and today I'm chatting with Gloria Anderson, along with her friend Priscilla Chandra, who are joining me in our Melbourne studios. At the moment, Gloria is sharing her life journey and the events from her childhood growing up in India that have had a lasting impact on her. Before the break, we heard how she always admired Mother Teresa and wanted to help marginalized people in society. Sadly, we also heard how she was abused as a child, and that sitting on a swing in a playground was where she would go to talk with God, who was always there for her. Now here's more of our conversation. God works in mysterious ways, and that's how he met you.
Yes.
But thank goodness that he did.
Yes.
I mean, it's horrific to hear all these injustices that you experienced at such a young age, but yet God was there for you.
I believe God was there right from day I was conceived, I reckon. I mean, obviously he does. That's what
your name's Gloria?
That's what the Bible says.
Yeah.
The way I was named as well, soon after I was born, somebody in the church had a vision of me for 3 continuous days. They would see me, obviously lying as a baby. They would see the throne of God, and they would see the light, the glory from the throne just covering, and everything around me on whatever I would wear would turn white.
That's what they were seeing in this vision.
That's what they were seeing in the vision for 3 continuous days. And that's when they approached my mom and said, you should name her Gloria. And then my sister said, no, we should name her Gloria. So I was named Gloria.
Oh, well. And thus you were named Gloria.
Yes. And I believe I think so, they say God had a plan for you. And I also believe, yes, God has a plan for my life. And I'm very aware of that. But I also believe Satan has a plan B.
He's trying to mess up that plan.
Derail.
Yeah.
But I think my early encounters with God were really crucial, even right from my naming, for the things to come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And getting back to your life story, at 10 years old, you moved to Kashmir?
Yes. Moved to Kashmir. It was soon after, just before my father passed away. Kashmir was my mum's maternal home. We went there to live with my aunt, with me and my brothers, and we stayed there. I was there till 98, and while we were there, my mum also moved to Kashmir, and she felt God called her to start a school there. So she started a school. People were running away from the valley because it was middle of a war zone. You got bombs going off.
What was the conflict that was going on?
It is still going on, actually. It started off December of 89 in Kashmir, and it's still...
between...
Oh, it's between the Kashmiris and the Indian government.
Okay, so you find yourself at 10 years old in a war-torn... In a war zone.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not sounding good, Gloria.
No. But in the midst of that, my mom felt, while people were running away, she was running in. She felt... She
wanted to help.
She wanted to help, and she had a heart for the kids. Like I said, we had a kindergarten at our property, and she sort of kind of took that vision, and God spoke to her through Isaiah 61, and it was to heal the wounded and bind up the brokenhearted. And kids were lost. Kids were very, very lost. Schools were shutting down, getting burnt, all sorts of things. There were only few handful of schools there. Even starting the school was quite hard. My mom almost, we got threats from people, you don't shut that school, and
Why were they against it?
Oh, just competition or whatever reason, and
unrelated to the war.
Unrelated to the war or related to the war. There were threats from the militants, though. So it was, yeah.
Okay, so all that's going on. And then also, in your home, it was a place where people would come to live.
Yes. My parents always had always took people in. We always helped people in. I think so. We would always had an open house. And I think partly it's cultural. A lot of it is cultural as well. But then there's that extra understanding of this is our faith. This is how we express our faith by sharing the gospel. Mom always had...
it's biblical.
Yes.
To help people in need.
Mom always had tracts, always ready, always had New Testaments ready to hand out. She'll carry some in the Bible. She'll be on the bus. She'll pass it to somebody. So she's always ready to share the gospel.
Yeah.
She actually helped plant 3 churches, actually, in the area locally. So she was, she was an evangelist at heart. She always sharing her gospel.
So even though, as we discussed earlier, she did some things that
was questionable.
was a poor judgment on her part as far as with you, but she grew in her faith and admitted that was a mistake and was actually a strong Christian that evangelized her area. Yeah,
she was. She definitely was. She was she was a prayer warrior. We would wake up in the middle of the night. We could hear her walking in each room praying. So she definitely was a woman of prayer, and everybody can attest to that. And when she passed away, that was one of the things people came and said was, I was not well. She came to the hospital. She prayed for me. So definitely a woman of prayer.
Now, another woman who had a huge impact on you in India was Mother Teresa.
Yes.
Tell us about how she impacted your life.
When I was in grade 2, we were reading about inspirational people, and the only person I can remember from that is Mother Teresa. And it was how she, helped the people in Calcutta, and I wanted to become a nun. I wanted to join the sisterhood.
Oh, really? Okay.
Didn't realize what it took to be a nun, but I wanted to I wanted to join her and help people out. So it's really left an impression on me, definitely.
So that's your heritage.
Yes.
Like from your childhood, you're in a family that regularly took people in, helped people. Your idol, so to speak, was Mother Teresa, who of course is famous for helping people. But that's really your desire, and it still is to this day. Yes,
it is. One of the stories I always remember is this was part of when in the middle of my mom, they were planting one of the churches. They were driving along the road and they saw this guy walking on the side of the road, and he looked out of place because this is in India, so blonde hair, blue eyes, with raggedy clothes, bare feet, walking on the side of the road. And mom asked the driver to stop, had a chat. He had very minimum English, kind of figured out he got robbed and he was walking on the street. So they managed to take him somewhere, bathe him, put some clothes on, and we didn't know. So mom, along with other pastors and other people who were with her at that time, they brought him home. And I remember as a kid, the van pulling in and seeing this gentleman sitting at the back, and he had been homeless for a while in this
pretty
place.
rough looking.
Yes. So he had long hair, blue eyes, but because part of my mom's church, they always wore white, and so he was wearing white clothes. And as a kid, I looked and somebody said, "There's Jesus in the back of the van." Little.
You found out later that was not the case.
No, but it fit. At that time, it fit the stereotypical image of Jesus, what we had seen as a kid. So that was pretty funny.
Yes. But it was just another example of
and
your mother helping people.
And Mom, shared the gospel. Dad obviously fixed his, all the other cuts and scratches and whatever they had. Mom, and they gave him money and sent his way.
Yeah.
So that was.
But that's your heritage. That's where you came from.
Yes.
Helping people.
Yeah, we saw Jesus.
Well, that was part one of my conversation with Gloria Anderson, who in 2011 was abducted from her home by a boarder who she let stay at a granny flat on the back of her property. Today we learned about her childhood and how she always had a heart for helping marginalized people in society, just like her role model, Mother Teresa. Also, as we heard, she saw her parents helping people in trouble on a regular basis, and many of them stayed in their home. Next time we'll hear more of Gloria's story and the events leading up to her abduction. All that and more is coming up next time right here on Real Faith. Until then, I'm Eric Scadabo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.